Communication and Vaccine Messengers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast of The Ordinary Maverick. This is Ajay, your host, an ordinary maverick, sharing real life thoughts and experiences and maverick tips. So, today's podcast is something that's been in the news almost every single day over the last year or so. It's about vaccines, and yes, no guesses there, it's the COVID vaccine. Reading so much about it made me think, and I realized it all links back to communication. Now, how many types of communication can we think about? See, there's verbal communication when we speak to each other. Then there's non-verbal communication when it's our facial expression, posture, eye contact, hand movements, touch. And often we say the non-verbal is so critical, sometimes more than the verbal communication. As you may be saying one thing, but your non-verbal communication is telling another story. Then there's written communication, and nowadays that's email, tweets, Facebook posts. I mean, whatever happened to the simple letter, huh? And of course, listening is another type of communication. Active listening, so very critical. In fact, I think it's one of the most important type, and being a good listener contributes hugely to being an effective communicator. And then there's visual communication. We are surrounded by this today. Think about it. TVs, Instagram, Facebook, everything is visual. And today I'm going to speak about another type of communication, an ancient one, the genetic code communication, the very basis of life. But before that, let me ask you something. Have you heard about the three-legged stool model? I'm sure we have all seen a three-legged stool and even perhaps sat on one. What's quite unique about the stool with three legs is that all three legs are of equal length and need to be positioned right to make sure the stool holds the weight and doesn't collapse. Well, the three-legged stool model speaks about three key elements when one needs to ensure success, meaning no collapse and bearing the weight. So if successful communication was the end result, the measure of success, that is, then the three legs would be 1. An effective messenger, 2. The right content of the message, and 3. Of course, the correct receiver, right? Well, I must say in my life, I have come across many instances where issues arise as well as are resolved just with effective or not so effective communication. And it's always one of the three legs of the stool that was the problem. Either the content was not right, or the messenger didn't receive it correctly, or the receiver didn't hear or interpret it correctly. That's when the stool collapsed. So, what's all this about messenger RNA and the COVID vaccines? Let's try to understand a bit better. The messenger RNA, also known as mRNA, is a novel technology that essentially teaches our cells how to produce the coronavirus spike protein. That triggers an immune response if we become infected with the virus in the future. It's the spike protein of the coronavirus that is key to the infection getting a strong hold in your body. This is what the virus uses to attach itself to the human cell, ultimately entering it to infect. So, why is this new? You see, traditionally, many vaccines put a weakened or an inactivated germ in our bodies. But this is not the case with the mRNA vaccine. Instead, they teach our cells how to make a protein or even just one piece of a protein that triggers an immune response. This immune response, which produces antibodies, it's what protects us from getting infected if the real virus enters our body. Now, as per our three-legged stool concept, one needs a messenger, right? And this is the synthetically produced mRNA that's packaged in a fat coating. The fat coating protects the messenger until it's ready to deliver the message. The message itself is a genetic code and the receiver is the human cell. Now, when the vaccine is injected into the body, this synthetically produced mRNA that's packaged in a fat coating gets dumped into the cell. Once that happens, the message is delivered. Basically, the genetic code reaches the cell, which then creates the protein and displays the protein piece on its surface. But hey, wait, this is not the usual protein, right? So what happens is that our immune system recognizes that the protein doesn't belong there and starts building an immune response and thus starts making antibodies. Almost similar to what would happen in case of a natural infection with COVID-19 virus. The message itself is then disintegrated in the cell during this process. You see, there is zero risk here. The messenger RNA never enters the nucleus of the cell, which is where our DNA, the genetic material, is kept. So it's not affecting our cells in any way. And the cell that receives the message gets rid of the messenger RNA soon after it's finished using the instructions. It just produces the protein piece on its surface enough to trigger the immune response. So how come now that we have this kind of technology? Actually, this technology and technique has been tried out since decades against Zika and other viruses, and then also for cancer treatments. There were many pitfalls. The technology was too unstable, fragile, and the minute it was injected in the body, it would just disintegrate. Now the problem has been solved by giving it a fat packaging, which is something that is helping the messenger to bind onto cells much easily. So here it goes, the three legs, the messenger, the content of the message, and the receiver, all working towards a successful communication. Now, what's so fascinating here is that all these three were put together in record time. We know that one of the most important thing is the message. And for COVID vaccine, this was the genetic code. See, that's the key here. Without the right content, one can never successfully deliver the message, right? I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of communication. So how come this happened so quickly? I mean, less than a year into COVID-19 pandemic, we had a vaccine? Well, several factors. One, the SARS-CoV-2 is a member of coronavirus family. So scientists were familiar with these viruses and most importantly, knew that they use the spike protein to attach themselves to human cells. And that should be the target of any vaccine. Another big one is the absolutely amazing worldwide collaboration. I mean, wow! Researchers, labs all over were ready to share their data. In fact, just 10 days after the first reported case in Jan 2020, the viral sequence of SARS-CoV-2 was successfully uncovered and shared all across. And then, of course, the money. Vaccine research requires money and risk-taking. And the world was ready to do that. Billions of dollars pledged towards this, and with all hands on deck, the world had the fastest vaccine ever, developed and ready to use for its fight against COVID-19. And then, of course, one needs to keep the message intact with the messenger until ready to be delivered to the recipient, and that's where the ultra cold temperatures come in. You see, there are many enzymes used to ensure the messenger RNA with the genetic code stays within its packaging until ready to unravel. These enzymes are fragile, almost like chocolate that melts away in hot temperature. Thus you need to give it some kind of a coating, almost like an M&M, to keep the semi-liquid chocolate safe inside. And of course, how one freezes food to keep it from spoiling. So it's something like that. Given the short period of development and not having the luxury of time to see if the vaccine could be stable at low temperatures, The manufacturers got the vaccine out there at the temperatures they knew that they would work. As time goes by, I'm sure there will be further research and one may see changes in temperature requirements as well. When I reflect back this last 1 year, amidst all the challenges, the grief, the despair, development of the vaccine stands out as an accomplishment. And it all boils down to effective communication. Simple. The three legs. Get the content right, the messenger right, and the receiver. And boom, success. But wait, what if there are multiple options? Okay, that's also part of the communication, right? And information, including interpretation. Options are good, aren't they? Join me in my next podcast as I talk about options, good or bad, and of course, the big discussions right now about the various options for COVID vaccines. Write in your comments, share your feedback. I would love to hear from you. And for some more Maverick tips, do subscribe to the Ordinary Maverick podcast. This is Ajay signing off, wishing you an amazing day. Keep well, keep safe.